Knowing. This was first released in cinemas back in 2009 and was directed by Alex Proyas. Now, this is a film which stars Nicolas Cage, and anyone who knows Nicolas Cage films knows that him starring in the film doesn't tell you whether it's going to be a good film or not. You know, there are some stars like, for example, Denzel Washington, Daniel Craig, Sylvester Stallone, and people like that, where if you see their name, you just know it's going to be at least a decent film, or at least you know what it's going to be about. But with Nicolas Cage, that is just not the case. Now, what the reason for that is, I don't know. Whether he just is not very good at picking good films, whether it is because of his reported money issues and so he just stars in anything, you know, who knows. But that leaves us with the question of working out whether this is one of Nicolas Cage's good films or one of his bad ones. And I have to say, when looking at the story, it certainly sounds like it's going to be one of his good ones. The story is about how Nicolas Cage's character's son opens a time capsule which has a lot of numbers written on it. And Nicolas Cage's character works out that the numbers have not only predicted every catastrophic result over the last 50 years, but are basically saying that Armageddon is coming. So at this point, it probably just sounds like one of those, you know, run-of-the-mill, end-of-the-world dramas, but there is more to it, and that comes from the fact that this is in truth a sort of modern take on a couple of age-old biblical stories. The story of the Garden of Eden for one, and Noah's Ark for the other. Basically, some mysterious aliens are in the role of God, and it's hinted that they are the ones who initially put humans on Earth along with all life. And you can probably guess what that means for this film. You know, God's wrath and all that is coming along to wipe everybody out, and that is what's happening. And it's coming in the form of a natural disaster along the lines of a giant solar flare from the sun, which is going to wipe out all life on Earth. But the aliens are here, and they are going to, you know, preserve life on Earth by saving two of every species. So that's the bit of Noah's Ark. So, you know, it's kind of them to save two of every species. I don't know what we're going to do about, you know, incest and that. But anyhow, one of the two children the aliens want to take with them just so happens to be the son of Nicolas Cage's character. He, of course, has a problem with this because he doesn't want to lose his son. So, like I say, it's got an interesting premise, you know, some problems, but interesting all the same. And things do get off to a good start, as this film will definitely pique your interest. And visually speaking, it is quite a good watch as well. But the critical scores, on the other hand, they aren't that good. I mean, IMDb score isn't that bad, you know, it's about 6, but the Rotten Tomatoes score is just 34%, which begs the question of how a film which gets off to such, you know, a solid start and has such a great sounding, or at least decent sounding premise, can have such poor scores. It also begs the question of whether those scores are accurate. And the simple answer is yes, they are. And the reason for why are numerous, because to say the least, this film has some serious problems. And those problems are largely with the characters themselves, namely how illogically they act. For example, Nicolas Cage's character, he tries to stop what he thinks is going to be a terrorist attack. And without going into any detail, the way he attempts to do this is simply unrealistic and just borderline silly. And then there is his personality. He has severe communication issues with just about everybody, which, based on the character he is portraying, just does not seem realistic. I mean, maybe it's just Nicolas Cage himself comes across, you know, as too open and friendly, or maybe it is problems with the script itself. I don't know. Whatever the truth is, it is difficult to believe that this character would not be more communicative with pretty much everybody in the film. And yet, considering his lack of communication is such an integral part of the story, because it doesn't feel realistic to the character that he would have these problems, it creates serious believability problems. Or rather, it just feels like this guy wouldn't act like this, which is not a good look for a film. However, Cage's character is unfortunately one of the more logical characters in this film, and perhaps the worst character in this film is his co-star's character, which is played by Rose Byrne. Now, Byron's character initially comes across as being quite with it, but by the end she has to go down as one of the silliest and most unrealistic characters of all time. Well, perhaps not of all time, but, you know, pretty bad. Anyhow, without going into any great detail, Byron's character basically ends up kidnapping Cage's son. Then while kidnapping his son, ends up allowing his son, along with her own daughter, to be kidnapped by the aliens who have been trying to capture them so that they can take them to the new Garden of Eden before the Earth, you know, is destroyed. And the fact that she kidnapped them in the first place, considering what was going on, just feels so unrealistic. In fact, nothing about what the characters do in this film feels realistic, and that is the biggest fundamental problem with this film. There are other problems, but those problems could perhaps have been tolerated if the characters had been more believable. So all in all, what that means is that this is a film that promises a lot with a highly intriguing premise, but which unfortunately comes up very much short in the execution of that premise, mainly because of a failure to provide believable characters. So if you like films with interesting premises, then this is perhaps still worthwhile watching, as it will make you think, that's for sure, but it is not a great film or even a good film, and in fact it is likely by the end you will just kind of think, what the hell was the point of all that? You know, you'll probably think that the premise was interesting as well, but you just cannot escape the character failings, and that is the lasting feeling of this film. With that said, that's all from me. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe to my channel.